Left Alive is a Square Enix published game from 2019. It looks like a kind of stealth and espionage action title. The cover is trying its damnedest to look like Brand X Metal Gear Solid, but what most players didn't know at the time is that Left Alive is not a standalone game or a new IP. Left Alive is actually a spin-off of a long-running game series called Front Mission, a series I've never even heard of. Luckily, my friend Shnick is a huge fan of the Front Mission series, and he's here to fill us in on the franchise that Left Alive pissed over.
With pleasure, Jado. Buckle up. Front Mission is a series of strategy RPGs. I got introduced to the franchise when its third game was added as a downloadable game for the PlayStation 3 and PSP. Front Mission 3 became one of my all-time favorite PS1 games, and I later went on to put a bunch of hours into Front Mission 4 on the PS2 as well. Sadly, these here are the only physical copies I own of the franchise's mainline entries. More on that later. The big selling point of Front Mission is that your squad of characters use giant mechs, known as Wanzers, as their primary form of combat. But what distinguishes Front Mission from other strategy RPGs is that Wanzers do not have a single health bar. Their health is divided between their body, each arm, and their legs. Destroying the body puts down a Wanzer for good, but destroying arms and legs will disable weapons or restrict their movement. This adds a ton of strategy in how to deal with opponents, since it's often smarter to try crippling the enemy rather than destroying them outright. This is especially true in Front Mission 3, where you can get enemy units to surrender, letting you take their Wanzer for your own stockpile. In general, the Front Mission games are great at how they handle RPG progression. From gaining XP that helps pilots learn new combat skills, to the sheer amount of customization you can do with your Wanzers and their loadouts, it feels extremely satisfying to gradually build your squad from a team of rookies into complete killing machines that can take on an entire army of opponents. Plus, each game has an epic story with memorable characters and complex themes of warfare, political tensions, hidden conspiracies, and other dystopian science fiction tropes, but you get the idea. And now here's the problem. You probably didn't even know the series existed unless you live in Japan, because most of the series has never been released internationally. Before Left Alive, there were about 15 releases in the series, and only 4 of them came out in the United States, with just 2 making it to Europe. There's many reasons for the exclusivity, from coming late in a console's lifespan, to themes they thought would offend Western audiences, to not wanting to release a game with mature content overseas, even though they were perfectly fine with releasing Parasite Eve around the same time. You know, a game that contains this kind of imagery. But what it all seems to boil down to is Square Enix just abusing the series and ignoring the developers' wishes for worldwide releases. The only game in the series that was never intended for an international release was Front Mission 5, because it was wrapping up the plots of all those games the rest of the world never got to play. And while there's been plenty of efforts at fan translations, a few of the games still remain unplayable in English to this day. For a while, the last entry in the series was Front Mission Evolved, which lots of fans hate because it's a third-person shooter and not an RPG. And yeah, having played it myself, it mostly comes off as an uninspired Armored Core knockoff. But you know what? At least it's kind of still a Front Mission game in spirit, having the same level of Wanzer customization and development as the mainline entries. Much more than what can be said about Left Alive and its attempt at creating sort of a survival horror game. It's a pretty neat idea on paper, but Jado, just take it from here.
Okay, my PlayStation 5 is still not installing any game updates. Belated apologies to Rise of Kong. So I guess we'll start with the game in its launch state. 4 difficulties to pick, and I guess we'll go with the standard. Alright, you play as a mech pilot named Mikhail, who's trapped in a town that's under attack by an evil army. His platoon is dead, and he's left to fend for himself. And you are dumped in with 0 tutorial or control explanation of any kind. Great, no matter, I've got handgun bullets and a clear headshot. This should be a piece of Jesus Christ! Okay, I guess this is a stealth game because you die in seconds and your bullets barely even tickle the enemies. I found a metal pipe to beat people with, and that seems to be the only thing that works. And it's breaking. Great. All over the place you pick up random bottles and cans. Is there a crafting system? If so, how do I get to it? Are there limits to my inventory? If so, where do I find them? The control layout is completely borked. R1 runs, L3 crouches, X leaps for cover, circle vaults over terrain, and L1 uses gadgets. I keep accidentally popping healing items because I think L1 should do literally anything else, and all of your inventory items have the same use button. It looks like the game wants me to duck down into the sewers, where you run into two enemies that there is no way to sneak around, and my bullets still aren't doing squat! Finally managed to beat them to death with my now broken metal rod, and now 4 more completely unavoidable soldiers spawn in? I don't have anything else that deals damage! What the hell do I do? Any tips for slipping past them? Any options for slipping past them? Anything at all you want to tell me about your goddamn game that'll help me get past the first 15 minutes?
I don't want to die yet.
So, funny story. Left Alive not only had to patch in tutorials after launch, along with a starting inventory of health packs and way more ammo, it also had to patch in a playable difficulty! Even on its easiest setting, Left Alive at launch was pure punishment. Your guns do nothing to the enemies. Even if they did, you barely find any ammo. Even if you did, the game restricts how much ammo you can carry. And even if all that wasn't a factor, you die in seconds in any kind of open combat. Your only means of defeating any of the enemies are melee weapons, which quickly break, or to craft explosives, which are finicky and take time to set up. Past that, you just have to hope that you find enough cans and bottles to toss for noise distractions. Noise distractions that, in my experience, barely work. All of this would be workable if Left Alive were designed as a stealth game where non-lethal means were always an option, but it's not. There are several points in the game where you are forced into combat as part of a scripted event. In fact, this happens as early as the 2nd level. You'll have to kill well over a dozen enemies at once, and there is no way out of these fights. And if you don't ration your meager resources correctly, well, you'll get stuck with literally no means of killing the mandatory enemies. Replaying past levels to try and stockpile more resources isn't a thing either, by the way. It's a giant, intricate web of being screwed no matter what you do. The game was so catastrophically unplayable that they had to patch in the insultingly named casual difficulty. On casual, your guns do normal damage, there's no limit to the ammo you can carry, and you have enough health that you can take a lot of hits. For players that want to go in guns blazing, they word it like you're too dumb to play a survival game, and not like they were too dumb to make one! Something else the casual difficulty adds that's not in the base game? Working headshots! In the game's regular difficulty settings, pumping bullets through an enemy's brain does nothing! You need to have never even looked at a game with guns to achieve that level of incompetence. And yeah, I know the enemies have armor on their heads, but they don't have good armor anywhere else on their bodies. You want to shake that tree, you're still gonna lose the debate of why it takes an entire magazine and change to down one douchebag! So yeah, we're playing on the casual difficulty because I'd like to finish this Drek before Christmas! Anyway, the game is set in the fictional city of Novoslava, which is on the border of two rival countries. Ruthenia, which fought a bitter war for independence but is small, poor, and having corruption problems, and Garmonia, which is huge, rich, nakedly evil, and hell-bent on re-annexing Ruthenia out of entitlement. This feels like a paper-thin allegory for Russia and Ukraine, especially since the textures are full of flavor text in Russian! Garmonia invades Novoslava and slaughters the population, and the game follows a small handful of survivors trying to escape, while being dragged into a conspiracy around why war broke out in the first place. Every level you're dumped into an open map and have to find your way to the exit through hordes of patrolling enemies, scavenging supplies to craft traps and weapons along the way. Mostly you craft exploding can makeshift grenades, Molotov cocktails, smoke bottles, and landmines, because every time that I experimented with tripwires, the enemy immediately saw it and avoided it. Mostly you try to sneak around enemies to avoid combat altogether, which means a lot of slow, careful trudging between objectives. I freaking hate making videos on stealth games. You have to scrub through 10 minutes of sneaking for 10 seconds where stuff happens. Oh, and as far as risk-reward for getting into combat, there is none. Dead enemies never drop weapons or supplies, and only drop a few handgun bullets if you're extremely lucky. Even for a game that loves to beat its chest about survival, it's the first of many basic missing features. Why can't I pick up a downed enemy's gun? Did every single person I shoot just happen to run out of bullets a split second before I killed them? And what is the point of having grenades if enemies will immediately shout, "Oh crap, grenades!" and dodge all of them? Even with the new casual mode, Left Alive is a frustrating trudge to play through. Several areas of the map will be marked high vigilance, meaning that there are a lot of enemies on high alert that will swarm if you get caught. You'll immediately be facing fire from all directions, and because the game thinks it has a real-time dynamic map or some shit, enemies will migrate from across the level so that soldiers just spawn infinitely. And you start with nothing but a shitty handgun and whatever trash you've scavenged up to throw at enemies. If you get caught, you're screwed, and there is no way to unscrew yourself. Okay, so simple solution. The map warns you where the enemies are concentrated, just avoid those areas. Good plan, except these levels were designed by a dickweed. Levels are designed to look big and open with tons of paths that lead to the objective, but they aren't. Level 3, I spent probably 40 minutes wandering around lost because every single path that I found was blocked off by unmarked invisible walls. Yeah, you're supposed to be able to climb and vault over obstacles and terrain, except when you can't because the game sucks. Levels will deliberately box you in so that you have no choice but to trot through dense, unkillable collections of soldiers. Chapter 4, I have to make my way to an enemy leader's tent by going through, about 20 soldiers backed up by snipers. Nuts to that, I'll just sneak the long way around and avoid these encounters altogether. Oh, look! The way around is blocked by a frickin' tank that you cannot fight or avoid. Deal with the soldiers or else shut off the game. And the stealth barely freaking works. You have no kind of stealth takedown and no way to silence your weapons, so downing any single enemy involves rolling the dice that nobody hears your gunshots or hears you loudly beating a man to death with a shovel. You can throw items for distractions, but most of the time that I tried, it either barely did anything or gave away my own position. One time I tried getting past a cluster of guards by throwing a smoke bottle to blind all of them while I ran past. And apparently smoke doesn't do shit because every single last one of them was on my ass mere seconds later. These gadgets just don't work! And sneaking around and through enemies barely works because levels are swarming with fast-flying drones continually scanning to raise an alarm at a moment's notice. Like, I'll be the first to admit that I'm not very good at stealth games, but even you have to admit, the sheer number of missing basic features breaks whatever stealth gameplay this train wreck is trying to have. I only got through several of these areas by landing a few key headshots to create an opening or just running past for the exit hoping for the best. Neither of which are tactics that work outside of casual mode. Every level is a pure guessing game as to which enemies you're allowed to kill without screwing yourself, and whether your remedial combat options will let you take someone out without waking up the entire zip code! By now you've probably asked yourself, wait, why did they set this game in a universe of giant robots if you never drive a giant robot? Well, that's easy. It's so that onagers can patrol the map and one-shot kill you out of nowhere at complete random. Even if the Wanzers aren't actively looking in your direction, they will still sense and evaporate you. However, there are several levels with a section where you get to jump into the cockpit of one of Front Mission's iconic Wanzers and tear shit up with big-ass weapons. The catch? These sections tend to last for a minute or two at best. You will find a Wanzer. You will use it to shoot, a few tanks, maybe 2 or 3 enemy Wanzers. You kill enemy mechs by just pointing straight at them and firing everything. The combat has the depth of a puddle. You will then realize that the map is completely closed off and tiny, and your Wanzer can't actually go anywhere. You have to continue on foot. Words cannot express the disappointment of getting to helm a giant Godzilla-sized war mech that can tear through tanks like Kleenex, and then learning you have to jump out because you're stymied by parked cars at an ankle-high fence.
When I got to this moment in my own playthrough of Left Alive, I noticed something a little curious. They intended for this to be like a moment of triumph. Like, oh yeah, baby, we got our Wanzer. We're gonna shred everything in sight. Frickin' nothing's gonna stop us now. It's just sad, you know? Somewhere in here is a game that does truly care about the Front Mission series.
The game mostly just uses Wanzers as obstacles to make levels even more infuriating to navigate. There are 3 paths to the other side of this harbor, and all I need to do is sneak past this Wanzer. Oh, holy crap, this is actually working! Sneaking underneath it kept me undetected! I'm home free! Shit! The other side is blocked off by debris that I can't scale, and now I'm hosed. Hey, game, you know what other basic feature would kinda be nice to have? A load button on the pause menu so I don't have to die or quit out every time I want to reload a checkpoint. Okay, plan B. I need to trek to the other side of the map, and there are still more parked Wanzers to where I have to painstakingly go through multiple buildings clearing out snipers if I want to sneak around them. This whole process took me about 20 minutes, but I'm finally on the right trail to finish this. Fuck! This path's blocked by another Wanzer, and this one's not moving, so I can't slip past him. All that sneaking, all those wasted bullets, for nothing! Maybe I'm supposed to swim across. Nope, that doesn't work either. If you're going to railroad me to where only one path advances the level, why not just make linear stages instead of this confusing bullshit full of empty space? Oh, right, it's so you can cheap out and reuse this harbor map for 2 more chapters after this one. Hey guys, you know what a lot of good stealth games also have? A mini-map with vision cones so that you can gauge everything that you're doing, so you don't continuously get spotted from off-screen or have to guess around when a Wanzer will start nuking you. But no, instead all you get is
Caution, the enemy is approaching. Caution, the enemy is approaching. Caution, the enemy is approaching.
Any time that you aren't actively engaged in combat and an enemy is nearby, your stupid helper AI will start chanting, "Caution! The enemy is approaching!" on an endless damn loop.
Caution, the enemy is approaching. Caution, the enemy is approaching.
Even if it's the same enemy, even if the enemy is just standing in place, even if it's actually you approaching the enemy to sneak up and attack them, it never shuts the hell up! Sometimes the enemy is approaching alarm is helpful. If you're walking along and you didn't know that enemies were nearby, it's a nice early warning, but 95% of the time, yeah! No shit, enemies are nearby! I'm sneaking around them, you dumb sack of crap! And the stupid helper bot is only the tip of the iceberg on moronic AI. I'm wondering if they made the enemies into walking tanks on purpose to cover how they couldn't program enemy AI to save their lives. If you shoot from cover and you stay in cover long enough, enemies might just completely forget that they're in a gunfight and go back to their normal patrols, because the game cannot tell the difference between taking cover and hiding out of sight. I used a lot of Molotov cocktails in combat, and it leads to a lot of batshit AI quirks. Enemies will just sit still in the fire taking continual damage, which might just be how fire works in this game. But here's an enemy flat-ass walking into a fire that I had already started! And twice in a row I used a Molotov to ambush enemies before they knew I was there, and after the fire wore off, they both just stood there. Didn't even cross their minds that I might be nearby. Just your typical everyday spontaneous combustion up in here. Sometimes enemies won't even react to being shot. Multiple times. Often I saw enemies just up and run away during fights, even running straight past me for Lord only knows what reason. Can't talk. Need to shit. I've seen enemies in scripted fights just stay outside shouting that they were reloading endlessly. Oh, and enemies are designed to jump over terrain, and they will just run in endless circles, hopping up and back down like coked up bunny rabbits. And it's a complete crapshoot what will get you detected by enemies. Sometimes they are as deaf as the Quiet Man, and sometimes they can stare straight at you for several seconds and not notice. Hey bud, don't mind me just lining up a headshot here. Oh, he spotted me, and he is not shooting at me. I was out of cover in plain sight for ages, and neither of these bozos knows where I am. Peekaboo! Oh wow, dipshit just watched his friend get pulped, and he still isn't certain if an enemy is around or not. I was just—
Caution. The enemy is approaching.
Yes, you stupid AI, I know he's approaching! There, just to shut you up! But as dumb as all the enemies are, they don't even hold a candle to how dumb the civilians are. In case you're not struggling enough just to keep yourself alive, there are civilians that you can try to rescue during levels. You track down a survivor and they will trek to one of the underground bunkers dotted throughout the map. You can tell them to start or stop moving from the pause menu, and you have to escort them through any enemies that are along the way. Or just be smart and clear the path beforehand. Doesn't sound that difficult, and my first rescue appears to be going off without— oh crap, we just got spotted by a drone! And within seconds, the entire country of not Russia has swamped our position. Poop! Okay, time for redemption. I found another survivor that looks pretty simple. The path is clear. All I have to do is watch in horror as the civilian walks straight into a wall of tanks. You dumb son of a bitch! Yeah, every survivor travels a very strict pre-built path that you cannot change. There's a road to the bunker 2 feet to the left that we could have taken and survived, but my escort didn't get the memo. Hell, if you stand in the way of a survivor's evacuation path, they won't even go around you. That's how dumb they are. And just to add insult to injury, many survivors actually refuse to be rescued until you run a stupid-ass side quest. Like I need to earn the privilege of escorting 200 pounds of dead weight through an active war zone. This lady refuses to budge until you retrieve her dead husband's wedding ring. Slight problem. Hubby died smack in the middle of an enemy camp surrounded by soldiers and heavy weapons. Screw you, lady! Or one guy won't evacuate until you find his family portrait, and this is where the game just flat out cheats, because the second that you grab the portrait, 4 heavy armored troops with obscenely strong Gatling guns just warp out of thin air to box you in. Surprise, numbnuts! Some of these come down to dumb luck, as I ran into 3 different survivors who wouldn't come with me unless I passed a series of random dialogue trees correctly. One mistake, and they are gone forever. And this weirdo, you can trade key items from 5 chapters ago for inventory items, but I have no clue how you actually rescue him. It's a scavenger hunt that you didn't know about and that you can't redo without replaying half the game. And why should you give a rat's tiny dookie about wasting ammo and getting blown up to rescue civilians? Because if you don't rescue anybody, you get a bad ending. And if you don't rescue all 30 survivors, you get screwed out of the good ending. So if you missed one single survivor along the way, you can skip all the rest because there is 0 reward in it for you. The game tells you a lot that every single decision you make is going to have dire consequences later. that literally just means rescue civilians and keep 4 supporting characters alive to get marginally better text over the ending. That's it. There's a part in the game where you can send Leonid out to try and rescue a plot-critical young girl. Literally nothing happens if you do this.
She's not my responsibility, but I can't just leave her to the sharks. I better clear them out of this part of town.
This is what we in the industry call schmuck bait, because I proceeded to waste tons of ammo fighting respawning enemies, only to find out my objectives hadn't actually changed. I was just supposed to leave. Grand. I will admit that the game gets more tolerable around the halfway point, when all the characters are decked out with good guns and plenty of ammo to where you can actually get into combat and have a shot at winning, when the game blatantly expects you to start playing like a shooter because paths around enemy encounters dry up more than usual. The game will even drop special limited use weapons in the form of sniper rifles to clear out key patrols, miniguns to massacre a group of enemies, and missile launchers to wipe out tanks. This led to one amusing moment where a cutscene told me to run like hell away from a death squad of enemies, forgetting that I had grabbed a minigun before said cutscene started.
Run, Mikhail. Run for your life!
You were saying, Chuds? But even at its best, I never felt that Left Alive was any good. The action is still slow, the maps still unnecessarily pad out and confuse the game, the controls are still stiff and awkward, and I keep running into stuff that doesn't work right. I had a fight where my Molotovs just stopped working for no clear reason, and one fight where I got stun-locked by enemies continually pushing me into fire. Some objective markers glitched to disappear, a critical Wanzer you need to pilot went completely unmarked until I stumbled across it on accident, and the last levels introduced bonus objectives that wouldn't mark as complete and don't seem to do anything. Even once the damn game becomes halfway tolerable, this is still a rickety-ass ride threatening to completely fall apart at any moment. Case in point, the item boxes. Next to every save point is an item box that you can plunder for supplies or store excess items for later. It's an inventory system plundered straight out of Resident Evil, but there's a twist. In Resident Evil, all the item boxes are connected so that they all have the same collective inventory. These aren't, so they're freaking useless. Any items that you put into a box are gone forever unless you backtrack to that one specific box later on, which you won't unless you're stupid. Even with the game recycling some levels for multiple chapters, you will never see the vast majority of these item boxes again, so what's the point even having them? Just rob them blind and move on without consequences. Oh, and if you play while connected to the internet, which I didn't because I'm an idiot and didn't have my software up to date, the game will drop dead NPCs in spots where other players have died, and those bodies will drop extra ammo and resources. I'm not sure how much you can count on this feature, though, because according to the game's trophies, 5 out of 6 players call it quits before the end of the second level. Out of 14. Only 5% of players bother to finish the campaign. The trophy for basic game completion is ranked as ultra rare. Crap in a hat! YouTuber Matt McMuscles did a deep dive into the development of Left Alive for his show What Happened, and the big takeaway was that the game was in the hands of a rookie director who cared way more about the story than the gameplay. In particular, he was obsessively rewriting and redesigning Mikhail to make him more innocent and earnest, and therefore more whiny.
Just perfect. What am I supposed to do? Oh, you gotta be kidding me. How am I supposed to do that? Everyone said it wouldn't come to war.
In fact, the director was so convinced that Left Alive's story was its key selling point that the game blocks streaming for not only all of its cutscenes, but also all of its loading screens because they have plot recaps. I've only ever seen 2 other games use this feature on PlayStation. Batman Arkham Knight blocks out the reveal of the knight's identity for all 3 people who hadn't figured it out yet, and Godzilla blocks out any scene with the Big G's theme song to protect streamers from copyright claims. But blocking all the cutscenes? Get over yourself! So if this video disappears, it's probably because I'm about to recap the entire plot bit by bit so you can gauge how good it is for yourself. And I wrote this section as much for my benefit as for yours. I needed to take step-by-step notes because blow me if I could figure out this mess on my own. Alright, so the game is split between multiple player characters caught in a war in Novoslava between good guys Ruthenia and bad guys Garmonia. Mikhail is a pilot just trying to survive when he runs into some evil general guy. Let's call him Scarface, I never bothered to learn his real name. And Scarface pisses off for no reason. Our second player character is Olga, a police officer investigating missing children. She thinks that a mad doctor is involved, but the mad doctor is killed by another evil general guy. Let's call him Meltyface, because I couldn't bother to learn his name either. And Meltyface pisses off for no reason. Both our heroes try to escape the city, but Mikhail gets roped in with a journalist that wants him to help investigate a politician who may have started the war over a conspiracy around a brand new illegal Wanzer. Olga runs into a little orphan girl named Julia, who runs away, and then she runs into another evil general guy named Ruslan. I did learn his name because they say it a lot. Ruslan was the leader of the revolutionary group that freed Novoslava and then was supposedly assassinated by his right-hand man Leonid. And then Leonid pops out, also not dead, because he was framed and he's escaped from prison. So now Leonid joins as yet a third player character out for revenge against Ruslan. Leonid runs into Sofia, another member of the revolution, who just cannot believe that both he and Ruslan are still alive. She tells Leonid to go to her bar later. Mikhail rescues the politician for all of 2 minutes before he gets himself killed by Scarface, who is revealed to be a part of Zaftra, which means nothing to you if you haven't played the other front mission games. Olga goes to the docks looking for the mech, but instead she finds Julia and gets captured by Meltyface. Meltyface was trafficking children between countries with help from both governments, but then Meltyface is murdered by Ruslan, who takes the girl! And I had to look up who this guy was. They suck so hard at setting up characters, I thought this was yet a fourth new evil general. They had to add a flowchart to the game's pause menu to keep the characters straight. I am dead serious! Mikhail goes to the slums to look for a factory, doesn't find shit, and gets caught up on the Ruslan situation by Sofia, because this story is so convoluted that we need filler chapters to teach the other characters what's going on in other plot threads. Mikhail gets called to the harbor to find the illegal Wanzer, while Leonid kills Ruslan in a piss-easy boss fight. I get the distinct feeling that Ruslan isn't actually dead, but 7 or so shotgun rounds to the face ought to make sure just in case. Leonid meets with Sofia, who claims that she already knew that Ruslan was a spy, which does not gel with any other conversation that we've had with her, because this game desperately wants you to think it's clever and smart, with huge big twist reveals that make absolutely no sense. Seriously, characters will constantly react to information they've heard 5 times like it's news, and characters just teleport across the city for no rhyme or reason. Leonid jumps into the water to escape bad guys in Chapter 5, appears across town to rescue Mikhail in Chapter 6, and then only just now leaves the water in Chapter 9 to meet with Sofia, who references all the stuff that happened in Chapter 8, which was after 6. They wanted a non-linear narrative, and they just left it physically impossible to arrange the chapters to where the story makes sense. Damn! Alright, Mikhail finds the illegal Wanzer, and the journalist guy just takes a huge exposition dump and explains the entire plot. Zaftra is now ruled by a brand new global terrorist organization called Semargl, which apparently just controls everything in the world in secret. And Semargl arranged for Novoslava's liberation via a false flag freedom fighter movement led by Ruslan. They did this to make the city crushingly poor, which allowed Semargl to install a puppet government so they could use a fake orphanage and the desperate population to develop a blood-borne virus. Then Semargl had Zaftra get Garmonia to invade Novoslava and kill everyone, leaving the invading soldiers to die to the virus so that both sides are wiped out. That would leave no potential witnesses to Semargl's real endgame, which was to secretly manufacture and transport the illegal Wanzer. And what does the top secret illegal Wanzer actually do to be worth this years-long conspiracy and international scandal?
Nothing! Absolutely nothing!
You pilot this supposed god mech twice. It has a weak shield and a railgun. That's it. Even the game's built-in encyclopedia doesn't tell you why this thing's so important. Just functions that set it apart from every other Wanzer on Earth. What functions, butt munch? So this entire year-spanning stupid-ass plan The Civil War, the fake revolution, the child trafficking, the puppet government, the genocide, the faked assassinations, and the mass suicide invasion taking out your own forces, the grand payoff was a single, barely above average war mech. In a world where war mechs are common as the cold. In real-world terms, the game is suggesting that the Russia-Ukraine war was orchestrated by a terrorist organization so that they could build a single jet fighter. That's how low the stakes are for this stupid-ass global conspiracy. When Neil Breen writes better conspiracies than you, well, I'd say to stop writing, but much like Mindjack, there are no writers in the credits! Anyway, the last 4 chapters have basically no story and are almost entirely combat. Our heroes go to a hitherto unmentioned place called Newtown because the only way out is to get to the chopper! Oh, and Olga got rescued off-screen. Shut up. Olga rescues Julia. You have to talk the young child out of suicide because ow the edge. And then the only good level in the game happens. Mikhail jumps between a series of Wanzers with wildly varying weaponry to fight off an entire army of enemy mechs in a huge city-spanning map. One of the mechs I found only had melee weapons, so that was an interesting twist. It's the one time in the entire game where you have extended Wanzer combat encounters that take actual maneuvering and strategy. The Wanzer combat still isn't great, but it's the only interesting and fun thing that happened all game. Who would have thought the game would improve if you put more mechs into the mech franchise? And just to sell how pointless this conspiracy Super Wanzer is, Scarface whoops your ass in a Wanzer that can fly. Remind me again why the terrorists wanted this thing so badly? Ruslan is still alive because at some point he became a cyborg. I called it! This is why! This is why you always go for the head! So you shoot Ruslan again, and then he tries to kill Leonid in a Wanzer that he pulled straight out of his metal ass. You can really tell they had to nerf this final boss to hell and back because fighting Wanzers on foot just isn't a thing. The boss jumps around, barely attacking you while you use a hurriedly introduced laser pistol that barely works. You point at the boss and hope that eventually the reporter shoots it with missiles. Yeah, take your time there, asshole! Our heroes escape and the ending is just cheap text. I got the mediocre ending, so Novoslava is occupied by a peacekeeping army and everyone just kinda went back to their regular lives like nothing happened.
What, if anything, did humanity learn from these sacrifices?
I think that humanity learned not to let a rookie director and a studio that's only ever done support work develop a AAA game! And now we come to the grand conclusion. The real reason why Left Alive is such a broken piece of hot garbage. Once you finish the campaign on any difficulty, you unlock the New Game Plus mode. And when you start the New Game Plus, you get skill points that you can spend on upgrades to make the game playable. Were you pissed off that your guns were about as effective as throwing milk duds? Well here, now you can buy patches for each individual weapon type so that they might deal halfway decent damage. Were you sick of bleeding after every other shot that you took? Here, buy another patch that tones it down. Couldn't run anywhere, always getting caught during stealth, could never tell where the enemies were, dying all the time? Buy whatever patches you can and start grinding for the rest. The other perks are garbage, buffs to gadgets that I never used, or buffs to Wanzers like that was an issue. Most of the upgrades are sectioned off until you've beaten this entire miserable game a second and third time. From this point on, you can use the New Game Plus mode to start the campaign over anytime that you want, banking skill points to buy more upgrades and then start again. This is also why it's next to impossible to rescue survivors. You are fully meant to lose everyone and get the bad ending, and then gradually grind up to the good ending around your 4th or so playthrough.
Yep, Dead Rising did keep replaying on New Game Plus and Brain Dead Survivor AI well over a decade before Left Alive did. And it was still a better experience because, tough as it was, frickin' you could beat the game on a first run and get a good ending to boot!
And if you're wondering if these perks actually do anything, I went back and I checked. On light difficulty, it takes 8 handgun bullets to the center body mass to down a single enemy soldier. With the New Game Plus perk on the exact same enemy and difficulty, it takes 3. These upgrades more than double the damage output of your weapons to where you can actually fight people. That honestly pisses me off more than if the perk had done nothing, because they knew that this was a problem. Left Alive was intentionally made horrifically unplayable so that you can grind for basic gameplay patches until it resembles a proper functioning release. Imagine that you went to a pizza restaurant and you ordered a pizza, and the owner brought you out a plate of human feces, and you're told that if you finish eating the whole plate of actual human shit, the next time you come, they'll serve you a week-old stale pizza. And then if you finish that one, your third visit, they'll actually serve you the fresh pizza that you ordered in the first place. And when you storm out without paying, never come back, and leave as many horrid reviews as you can, they mouth off to you for not being man enough to eat there after serving you literal shit on purpose! That's what Left Alive is. Serving you a plate of shit on purpose. Left Alive is complicated. Most of the game's difficulties have broken stealth, useless weapons, woefully unbalanced encounters, obtuse level layout, stiff controls, broken side quests, a dumb and confusing story, mech combat so marginalized and dumbed down as to be pointless, linear design that's fighting to gaslight you into thinking that it's not linear, and caution, the enemy is approaching! The very easy mode that they added in addresses one of those issues, easing off the combat enough that you can get to the end without addressing any of the rest of the mountain of problems. And sure, the New Game Plus mode lets you gradually break the game in your favor to where it might get entertaining. You still had to suffer through 12 to 15 hours of abysmal game to get there. And then to find out that at least some of the game's problems were left in on purpose because the dev team was obsessed with length and replay value? Go to hell! Left Alive is a game that actively hates its player. It has no respect for your time, your entertainment, or your dignity. Yet it feels entitled to at least 4 playthroughs worth of your time. It's a confused and broken mess, and one might say, it's just bad.
Thanks again for having me on the episode, Jado. Oh, right. And this little guy says hi to Mama.
Wait, Tails is your son? I do listen to you, I swear!
Caution. The enemy is approaching. Caution. The enemy is approaching.